Hello, Rachel.
Hey, Brittany.
So today I want to talk about a phrase I hear all the time and a phrase that as a writer I've unfortunately used a million times during the pandemic. And that is, we are living in unprecedented times. And it's used to kind of, scare people.
We've never been here before.
We've never been here before. And so I want to actually break down, thank you for saying that. I want to break down the word before we get into that. And so precedented, when something precedes, it happens. Right? That's kind of what that means. So proceed forward would mean like it's happening in the future. So we put that in front of it, which is a negative word, right? So unprecedented means like has not happened, never happened before. And during the pandemic, it was, unprecedented times. And to be fair, in our lifetime, that particular instance was definitely unprecedented. I think we're still recovering from that 5 years later. Excuse me. But we're hearing a lot of this constantly like, oh my goodness, we're living in times where we don't know what's going to happen. History has never been this way. Or you get people saying it hasn't been this way since World War II. And we can get into why that's a little bit hyperbolic later. But I want to talk about, are we really living in times that have never happened before? Or is this different because we're living in times where we're getting so much information about what's going on, or that maybe we've had it so good for so long, we're just not used to this. There's this great quote, and I want to make sure I don't butcher it. It's hard times create strong men. Strong men like create easy times create like soft men. Soft men create hard times. That was a lot to say. What does that mean? That means it also reminds me of a John Adams quote. So I'm going to kind of elaborate where he says something to the extent, and that might only be in the series. I can't remember if he said it or not. I actually think I checked it once and he didn't say it exactly like this, but he said, I study politics and law so that my sons can study, science and mathematics or whatever, so that their sons can study music and theater. So basically, one generation is doing what they need to do to solve the problem at hand in John Adams' time, the Revolutionary War and the creation of America, no big deal. So that, his children could focus on other things because they were living in a better world, which we love that for them. Yeah, we love that for them.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what happened, because what I'm seeing now is people saying life has never been this crazy before. And I was thinking back about all these times through history. And the first thing that struck out to me, I'm going to talk about three primary times, was the Victorian era. And I want you to go read about the Victorian era because, oh my gosh, I would never want to live through the Victorian era. So let me tell you.
Like Victorian England or in the United States?
Anywhere. Probably, actually anywhere. And let me explain why.
Anywhere.
What we knew about science and health and general well-being was... So, first of all, you only had a 50... It's all wrong. You only had a 50% survival rate. So if you even made it past 5 years old, you were already far and away better off.
Or even through childbirth.
Or even through childbirth. We'll get to that. And so, first of all, your survival rate is very low. So if you were here right now listening to this podcast, you were already kind of an anomaly, a miracle for what we lived through.
Yes.
Second, there was arsenic in all their food. And I can't remember their reasons for doing this, but that was commonplace. And it wasn't like some murky, like, oh, they're sneaking it. They knew.
Maybe it's delicious.
Arsenic is extremely toxic and extremely deadly. Not only that, it was very trendy for women to have really pale faces. And so they would use like arsenic and these other like harmful chemicals. Lead. Thank you. That's what I was thinking. Lead in their makeup to put it on their face because it was stylish.
Yes.
I gotta keep making that noise because I'm like,
okay. I have to do a side note. And do you know what they used to do for their eyebrows?
What?
They would have little eyebrow wigs made from mice fur.
I saw that, which is funny to me because we make fun of all the silly makeup trends today, but we're not putting rat hair on our eyebrows.
One more thing.
Please.
And their teeth would fall out because they didn't have good dental care
or water.
To keep their cheeks from sinking in from loss of teeth, they would put marbles in the back of their mouth to puff out their cheeks because they lost all their molars.
I wonder how long they would, like, I would choke over a I couldn't do it.
I know, right? Okay, enough about that.
And then you have the oil lamps or whatever they were, gas lamps at the time, which would explode all the time. Periodically, they didn't have the capacity to put out fires, so you'd have fires all the time. Cholera, this is the grossest thing to me in the entire world. So you would have whatever their idea of indoor plumbing was, it wasn't great, but they didn't understand. So all that water was going into their systems of sewage, not quite what we have today, but it was going into the water supply. So you're drinking and using to clean the same water people were using. Yes, to put it bluntly. And so people were getting cholera. There were cholera like outbreaks all the time, and you were not going to survive cholera. We talked in an earlier episode that the doctor's solution used to be bloodletting, where they were like, all right, we'll just bleed them till the disease is out. And more often than not, that killed people. So that was what life was like in the Victorian era. Now, maybe you didn't have the social unrest, which is what I think people are I think they're worried about health too, but that people are so up in arms about today in the Victorian era, though you also had women's rights and all these other things. And so there were a lot of things socially that were still going on. But childbirth, to mention one more, was so archaic, so to speak, that
and dangerous.
And dangerous because one, just the hygiene wasn't what it is today. And a lot of times they thought like women were in pain and they would say they were going through hysteria and things like that. So they would give them these drugs that were like, so I think ether was one of the practices, which is like, it just like passes you. You like put like a rag, you've seen in probably movies, somebody puts like a rag and they pass out. Or they put women in what's called twilight sleep, where you were like half awake so that you wouldn't remember. Sometimes they actually strap 50s. Them to the bed. 50s was specifically and 60s.
Twilight.
Another era that wasn't good. But actually, I'm glad you said that because I'm going to transition into the 50s and 60s. Another time that there was unprecedented times, or the times were worse rather. But in the 60s, you heard that phrase a lot too. You heard like, oh, we're in the end of times. And that's because so the 50s were this time that we look back on American history and we think like so wholesome. You had, girls in those long poodle skirts and everything was innocent and leave it to Beaver. And then you had the 60s and that just rocked American culture because you had teens really rebelling in a different way. You had rock and roll music. Oh my goodness. And you had, the people who later were called hippies who were freeing their mind and whatever that means. But there was a reason that happened, and that's because the Vietnam War, which I've mentioned before, was just an unjust war. We should have never been in that war. It was another fight. And as American governments usually do, is they meddle in other countries' elections. And so Vietnam is a Buddhist country. And America was like, we want to have control of this because there were conflicts going on in Asia with the Korean War before this that did involve Vietnam. And they were like, let's install this Catholic guy who agrees with us. That's, a friendly to the USA. You can't install a Catholic leader in a Buddhist country. That created chaos. You had Buddhist monks lighting themselves on fire in protest. This awful time. And then we decided to squash their own revolution. We were going to come in and we knew nothing about their culture, their practices, and it ended badly. But you had
That's
war.
Not the way to spread your faith.
Not the way to spread your faith. But we had war for the first time being put onto people's TV screens because we didn't have TV in everyone's household. And so people were seeing the horrific consequences of war and young men dying. And there was a rebellion. There was anti-war music. There were protests. And people were terrified of what that was doing to the youth of America. And it was, oh my goodness. Not to mention, we had assassinations. that were not necessarily the assassinations themselves. Assassination is a killing of a very important, political leader or political activist. You had John F. Kennedy, you had his brother, RFK, and then you had Martin Luther King. And people are just like, what is going on? And then you had, with JFK, then you had another murder of the person accused of his murder on TV. And
live on TV.
And people were thinking, what unprecedented times. We've never lived through this, and we're never going to make it as a country. And guess what? We did, because we always go through these times. But you'll notice with especially the 60s, it's because information was spreading faster. And so people were they were seeing this on TV. Now we flash forward to today, and we have information with the click of a button. Sometimes I'm like, it's too fast. I can't keep up with it, because X, or we used to be Twitter, it's every 2 seconds you're getting a new tweet and you're like, I have to go back and read the ones from minutes ago. And so I think we over exaggerate the unprecedented times we're living in. I think we forget that we have gone through very tough times again, which is why I started with the Victorian era, because I want to keep things in perspective. Are things a little chaotic now? Does the world seem divisive? Yes, it seemed divisive in the 60s, but oh my goodness, thank goodness we're not using arsenic in our food anymore. Thank goodness, this is another thing, they used to not wash baby bottles. So babies were not making it because they didn't realize, and they were feeding them bottles with bacteria in it. There's all these horrible rotten food, these horrible things that have happened that, oh my goodness, I'm so glad we live today where we're not dealing with that. And so when we do these hyperbolic, I love that word, blown out of proportion is what that means, rhetoric, we scare people into thinking this is something new. And it goes back to that quote I said in the beginning, hard times create strong men. We've had it relatively We've had it pretty good. And we have so many advances in life. Look at us talking to you on a podcast on the internet that anybody in the world can see. Oh my goodness, amazing. So I think we need to remember that maybe these seem unprecedented because we've had it so good, but throughout world history, things have been, oh my goodness, so much worse. So keep that in mind. Rachel, did you have something to say?
Well, I just wanted to reiterate. I love that quote. The strong men create soft times. Like however that quote is. There's a really good graphic. Like it all goes in a circle. And I think to kind of augment the quote that you mentioned about, who was it? John Adams, who
in the HBO series. I don't know if he said it really. I think he did, though. I believe he did, but I can't remember in what. I think it was a little different.
But I think it behooves us all as a culture to be aware of political issues and government and who's running things and kind of keep an eye on them. Like, don't ignore that because you're busy studying science and music and whatever. Keep an eye on that because we're likely to get back to, the hard times if we're not vigilant about keeping an eye on our leaders and politics. So politics affects everybody. Yes, it does. Be aware of it.
All right. Well, we will leave it there. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast. And until next time, Rachel, we will talk to you later.
See you later. Bye-bye.